My name's Emily. I'm from St. Louis. The work that I have in the show is all sculptural, and the materials are all nylon, polyester, silicone, and latex.
All right, and I am Jessica Hunt, also from St. Louis. And my work in the show, I have clay, plaster, photographs, though the photographs are more about the sculptural objects in the photo, less about the actual composition and not composition, but the aesthetic of the actual photograph. It's what's in there, the content. And also work with some nylon, steel, astroturf. I got a range.
I was really excited by, there's a lot of similar visual elements to our pieces. So there's a lot of curvilinear form. There's some crossover in material. And I was really excited to see our work in the same space and talk about the content coming from two totally separate places and allowing us to have a conversation about what's in front of us versus where it came from and how there's so much crossover there.
I think visually, definitely what excited me also, because I knew the work would look good together.
Yeah.
I felt that. I think the biggest struggle for us with the show was the content, because while a lot of the visual aspect of our work overlaps and feels very cohesive, and we're both coming from very personal places in our work, like the narrative is based on the personal and the intimate and the vulnerable. I talk a lot more about interpersonal relationships, where there's more of an introspection of self and body specifically in your work.
Yeah, and you can really see that whenever you walk through the space. If you're looking at Jessica's work, there's almost always a duality to it, or some sort of multiple nature that talks about the relationship of object to object, of subject to subject. But if you're walking through and you see more of a singularity, more of a standalone individual piece, I think that's when you start to see the difference in content.
I learned the term high context person, which means every single interaction, like part of an interaction, is important to me. So what someone says to me non-verbally is just as important as what they say verbally. And so I'm reading all of that and analyzing all of that, and then basically like putting it back out into the world in terms of sculpture. So, when I have a piece like You Only Like Me When It's Easy, it's very much a reflection of this personal experience that I've had, whether it's with a relationship to a romantic relationship, or there's pieces that are about family relationships. So me and my sibs as kids is very much, growing up in a really small space and kind of outgrowing that space together.
On a similar intimate relationship kind of note, my work is a reaction to both personal experiences that I have with my own body, and then also sort of conclusions and questions that I've come to regarding ideas about beauty, ideas about power, and sort of some anxiety around being a woman today, and feeling a need to conform to certain levels of beauty. The piece that I have that's made of latex, it's called In the Flesh, and it's 300 latex hypodermic cast syringes, and they all kind of stick out in this very skin-like form in an effort that I was making to create the perfect idyllic flesh. What does that look like? It's perfectly consistent, it's perfectly predictable, and so in its own perfection, in its own gridded, weird way, it looks uneasy, and that's the way that I feel about perfection with beauty in media today, is that it doesn't look right. it might look beautiful, but it doesn't look right.
And I think we both leave like, we incorporate a high level of ambiguity in each of the works so that there is room for the viewer to put their own subjectivity into it. It's not like, you know, if I make a piece called Chosen Family and it's about, you know, my relationship to a mentor, I don't want the viewer that comes up then to think, oh, this is about a piece about Jessica and her mentor. Like, the ambiguity is present, so you can think about, what is Chosen Family for you? Who is that in your life? What are the relationships you've cultivated that aren't, you know, created through blood?
Yeah, it's like we both created this empty chair for people to sit in,
Mm-hmm.
and the viewer can or cannot sit down in it if they want to, and that's what makes it so compelling for me to look at your work, especially.
Same.
Yeah, it's I get to sit down
Mm-hmm.
and I get to actually feel like a player in that theater.
Mm-hmm.
It was meant to be interwoven. It's meant to be a curation. It's meant to be a way for the viewer to walk through and organically see different pieces. And they fit together. I don't really know how else to describe it, but they just kind of fit together.
Yeah. I will say, I had a friend, Carrie Gillen, who's also an artist, come with us, and I feel like she was super helpful in saying, like, it's important that the viewer has a space to just sit and reflect, and if you have so many things right after another, they're not going to be able to, like, have that intimate experience, which the work is intimate.
Mm-hmm.
We do want self-reflection. I mean, the title was pulled out of, like, how we want the viewer to experience it, so thinking about that, and giving the work enough room to breathe was really important in the curation of the show.
Even last minute, we were pulling
Yeah.
stuff out that we didn't want to overcrowd the space,
Yeah.
because it is very important that you can sit back and reflect and not feel like it's just one artwork after another. Allowing the viewer to feel, allowing them to have their own personal experiences with it that's one of the most important things about how we chose everything.
Right. Something about these, like, the circular one, and then right when you turn the corner, the one with the felting and the silicone that's more circular that you had a question about putting at the end of the hall, those are definitely my favorite.
Okay.
Me likey, yeah.
Okay.
I like the felting that you did on that. Like, that was like a last minute sort of surprise that I was just like, yes.
Cool.
Yeah. And I also just like the dyed nylon. I think there's something really exciting about that palette. Also,
Yeah.
color palette.
I don't typically work in color. It's fun to do.
Yeah.
It's my favorite piece. It's presence, and that's probably why I'm struggling between that piece and the Grassy Boys.
Because that space is just
That
like,
space is so nice,
Yeah.
but the presence that your work has, and I probably would have said something different if it hadn't been for the install that we've done, because these individual sculptures also really excite me, and I can spend a lot of time with them and really feel like there's a whole story that I get to be a part of. With the larger pieces, though, I feel that their presence is so it's right there, it's apparent, and that's why I like looking at them in this space in particular. Because I can walk in that room, and I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm interrupting a conversation sometimes.
Ooh. Ooh.
I feel like I'm walking in, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.